Hello and welcome to the Astranti top 10 most likely unseen issues for the operational case study pre-scene analysis for May 2018, and we'll be looking at Mansako. Now this video is essentially one where we'll be looking at the top 10 issues that are most likely to come up in your exam in May. So what's the point in doing a video like this and a pack like this? How can we help you by telling you what we think might be the top 10 most issues? Well, here are some answers to that. So for one thing, it's going to help you to prepare key models from the pre-scene information. Now, the pre-scene analysis video series of 6 videos, was an in-depth analysis of the pre-scene, and looking at that, we were able to see areas of the business and how they relate to the syllabus. And we came up with some models that we could use for analyzing that. And in the strategic analysis video, we use some of those models. So you can use those models in as preparation for going into the exam. So for example, we did a SWOT analysis in the strategic analysis video, and you can use that going into the exam. But the thing to remember there is that you must remember to adapt all models for new points in the unseen exam. You can't go on what's in the pre-scene alone. New information might change things slightly, and that's what you need to go on. Another thing to do is that you can practice mock exams. We have a range of operational case study mock exams written specifically for this case study. So they're about Mansako for the May 2018 exam. And our questions are written based on what we think will be the top 10 issues. We also have what is called an industry pack. And in that industry pack, we have 25 real-life examples based on the sort of luxury leather goods industry that you can use in the exam. And you can even prepare sample paragraphs. It's definitely worth checking that document out and that video out, because the examiner likes to see that you have wider industry knowledge. And there's no better way of doing that than having a prepared sample paragraph based on something that's happening in that actual industry. Once you know the issues, or once you have a good idea of what you think might come up, you can learn the typical key points. And that's just going to be learning the main advantages and disadvantages. So maybe that means, breaking out your old P1 textbook or E1 textbook and going through and revising the things that you learned for the exam. For example, budgeting or costing could come up. We know the company use an incremental budgeting approach. And there are obviously benefits and drawbacks to using that approach, and the benefits of drawbacks to using different approaches too. So that's the kind of thing you can just learn to go into the exam with. And if you get a question on budgeting, you've got those things immediately there to reel off and get you good marks. So finally, it's going to help you to be prepared for which models to use to support the issue. So if you know what the issue is likely to be, you can know which models it is you should use in that issue, and with each issue we'll be telling you kind of what models and what theory you can use in that scenario. So how do I decide what will be an issue in the top 10? Well, there are 3 main elements to that. The first thing I consider is its focus in the pre-scene, so the number of times that it comes up, or the degree of importance attached to it by the examiner is a key one as well. When you're reading the pre-scene, you can sort of read between the lines, and you're trying to get into CIMA's head and think, well, why are they including this information? And often you can just sort of assume or make the sort of connection that, well, this has been included because they're probably planning to do an exam question on it. Next is the strategic importance. So in the strategic analysis, we did our SWOT analysis and came up with a business strategy. And so things likely to be important to the directors, perhaps on a weakness to overcome or an opportunity to take, those kind of things. That consideration goes into this, and that helps me make decisions about what I think will be in the top 10. And finally, and perhaps most useful, is my experience having worked on the operational case study exam since its inception, since it was first released several years ago. I've been involved in most of the pre-scenes and the exams, I've got a pretty good idea of what you can expect from an exam based on what's put in the pre-scene. Okay, and with that, let's get into the issues. Just a quick disclaimer, they are in no particular order, so number 10 isn't any less likely than number 1. They are just randomly placed in numerical order. So in at number 10, we'll be looking at risk management. So what was my basis of choice in this case? Why have I decided to choose risk management? Well, for one reason, it's a key P1 topic, and particularly the identification of risk or risk management techniques and controls of risks. Those are important parts of the P1 syllabus, and so that makes it relevant for this. It's also recently examined and regularly examined. It's kind of an obvious area for any company. All companies have risk, and that risk needs to be managed. And so this is one that often comes up in most pre-scenes. So what would the likely issues be here? Well, for one, it would be a general risk. It may be a general risk management and control question where you have a particular product that the company is proposing or a particular project, and there is kind of an element to which you have to analyze the risks involved of and going ahead with this new project and perhaps coming up with a conclusion. And you could do this for a particular project, or it could just be for the whole organization based on the risks we identified when looking in the pre-scene. So it could be something like that, so the management of risk and controlling it, or it could be how risk should be managed in the pre-scene company. And in that case, you would perhaps talk more about the role of the audit committee. Obviously, we don't know whether there's an audit committee at this company. There may or may not be. We shouldn't assume really one way or the other. If anything comes up in the exam and the unseen about that, then we'll take that advantage, take that information at face value. But obviously the role of the audit committee would be primarily to oversee and to control risk. And so one question might be suggesting the setting up of an audit committee to oversee a perceived risk. There's also the cultural aspect of it, and cultural managing it being an essential part of the culture at the company. So there are several key risks that the company face at the moment based on what we've seen in the pre-scene. One of the major ones is just the general decline in the industry, in the luxury goods, high-end goods market, particularly fashion. There has been a decline, and there is a big change up in the industry. Things are changing, and that obviously poses a risk because we can't just assume business as usual anymore. In addition, the company has quite low operating and net profit margins, and that's a real area of weakness for them. So those are just two of the key risks, but those ones I think are the most salient risks that would be likely to come up in an exam scenario. If, again, something does come up on risk, then it's really important for you to talk about how important risk management is at the operational level. So a lot of times risk management is sort of as maybe a more strategic aim, but it's important at every level, and we'd have to talk about how it's still important at the operational level. And if you are suggesting a control for a risk, then you have to explain how your control will actually manage the risk and how you can measure that your control is actually working. Our next issue is governance. So the reason why I chose this is the fact that we actually have a public listed company. For the last few pre-scenes in the last 12 months or more, most of the companies in the pre-operational level pre-scene have actually been private companies, fairly small companies, privately owned. And so to have a publicly listed company opens up the doors for questions on corporate governance, and that suddenly becomes a much more important aspect of the company. It's an important issue for any company too, so whether it's publicly listed or not, it certainly would be if they were private, but as a publicly listed company, it's more important, and there needs to be clearly defined roles and responsibilities for the member of the board. And perhaps the most sort of notable thing was the fact that there was no non-executive branch of the board. We had a list of all the directors, the executive directors, but for a public listed company to not have any non-executive directors on a company this size is fairly unusual, and this might be something that comes up in the exam, where a non-executive department directors need to be established. So likely issues based on what we've seen in the pre-scene, it could be a dispute between key management. So perhaps one of the main directors disagrees with another one, and that could cause a dispute. And there's a need for sort of conflict resolution in that area. It could be preparation for an external audit, and that would link in quite nicely with the kind of F1 sort of exam, F1 syllabus, and checking the accounts and making sure all the books have been done properly for the external audit. There might be concerns about governance from investors. Now, obviously, the shareholders, that you have the agency problem where you have the shareholders who own the company and you have the directors who are running the company, who are employees of the company. And usually you would have that non-executive director aspect of it who would kind of are sort of there to sort of have a voice for the shareholders beyond the annual meetings. There may be an issue over setting up internal committees. So we already talked about perhaps setting up an audit committee in the risk management section, but there's also the nominations committee and other committees may be set up in order to adhere to good governance standards and practices. And as I said, establishing NEDs, non-executive directors, because there currently are none, and it seems like there is room for that at the moment. Now, there are no hints that shareholders are unhappy, but just in terms of good governance practice, it would be a good thing to have. And we'll look more at that in the next slide. So the key things to really talk about on governance is the fact that it's really essential to a successful business. Ignoring legal requirements or anything like that for the moment, just as a practical tool, as a way to make businesses operate effectively and successfully, governance is really important to that. But in addition to that, there are certain legal requirements, particularly for a public listed company. And so public companies have to meet certain standards, and Mansako will have to make sure that they are meeting those. So just before we finish, I'd like to take you through some of the products we offer in the entire case study course. So this is just one element of the whole course, and I'll just go through the other things that we offer here. So to start with, we have a study text that is devoted to the operational case study, and that's split into two parts. The first part is a guide to how to pass the case study exam. It's full of exam tips, exam strategy, time management, preparation and planning, how to write to the marking criteria, all those kinds of things. And then part two of that study text is a condensed version of all the relevant material of the kind of things that come up in the exam over and over. So essentially it's the most popular topics that have come up in past exams from E1, P1 and F1. And so those are the two study texts available for the operational case study course. And we also do course videos that are roughly based around that first study text. So the exam advice and the timing, the planning, all the things that go in to preparing an exam strategy. We have an entire series of videos that go through that in detail. So if you're more of a visual learner rather than a reader, you can check those out, and they'll be a great help in getting you past the exams. The pre-scene analysis is the series of 6 videos where we look through the actual pre-scene in minute detail, going through every paragraph, making notes and looking how we can use this information to better prepare for the exam when the exam comes up. Separate from that is an industry analysis, and that is a document and a video as well. So the two are in tandem, and the document is about 100 pages looking at the industry in which the company exists. So for example, if the case company is in the car and they're a car manufacturer, then the industry analysis would be an analysis of the car industry. And that's like I say, that's a large document where we break it down. And we're essentially, the point of that is we're doing the research for you to save you time and energy. And the really great thing about the industry analysis is that we include 25 industry examples at the end. So things that happened in the real industry. So the example I just used, it being the car industry. If we were doing the car industry, we'd take 25 examples from the car industry of relevant news and things that have happened to companies and to the industry and consumers or whatever it is. As when we get from those 25 examples, we write a little exam paragraph, the kind of thing that you can literally rehearse and put it in your exam if it's relevant. Examiners do like to see that you have a wider industry knowledge, and so putting in a little example like that can get you good marks. We do mock exams. For the operational case study, we write 3 mock exams, and we have a free mini mock that you can do that are based on the actual CIMA style case study. So they're computer based, they're online, and they're timed, and it's as close to the real thing as we can possibly make it. And that's a really good way to prepare you for the exam. Each time we write our questions based on the pre-scene that's just been released. And with those mock exams, you can get marking and feedback, and that's really essential for you to, if you do your mock exams, I would recommend also getting marking and feedback, because you can then see where you went wrong or what you did well, and the feedback allows you to improve on that. Really important part that a lot of students skip over, and they really struggle in the exam because they weren't prepared, they hadn't done the mock exams. We have masterclasses that run over a course of 2 separate weekends, running up to the exam, and they're a live, essentially a live online class webinar where our tutor will go through with you the kind of a revision one where we're recapping on the most important topics from the E1, P1, and F1 syllabus, and one will be sort of more exam focused. And then finally, we offer pass guarantee, which means that if you meet all the requirements, so you use all these different products that are available, and you fill in a checklist to say that you've done those, but you still don't pass your exam, you're unfortunate or whatever, then we will allow you to resit our course, to take our course again at no extra charge. That's really great for people who are perhaps taking it for the first time and they don't quite pass, but they need to take the course again. If you've gone through that scheme and you've done everything that we ask you to do, then we'll give you the course again for free. Okay, and that's that. Just gives you an overview of the course that we have available.